Strands of aura of the great path emanated from Yi Futian's body and turned into beams of divine light. Divine lights stemmed out of his body like branches and engulfed the entire area. When the hell's lotuses got closer to Yi Futian's body, they started to rapaciously absorb the aura from Yi Futian's body. It was as if they were no longer controlled by the 8th plane demon snake anymore. Instead, they hovered around Yi Futian's body and did not try to devour him. Strands of aura of the great path emanated from Yi Futian's body and turned into beams of divine light. Divine lights stemmed out of his body like branches and engulfed the entire area. When the hell's lotuses got closer to Yi Futian's body, they started to rapaciously absorb the aura from Yi Futian's body. It was as if they were no longer controlled by the 8th plane demon snake anymore. Instead, they hovered around Yi Futian's body and did not try to devour him. The eerie scene caused many to fixate their gaze on him. They stared blankly at Yi Futian. The aura emanating from his body made the hell's lotuses rapacious. Beigong Ao and Emperor Helion also seemed surprised. Then they remembered the peculiar movements of the flowering tree from before, and they understood it. After all, Beigong Ao firmly believed that the flowering tree changed because of Yi Futian. He was a person who could make the divine tree bloom. Hence, it was normal for the hell's lotuses to have an affinity with him. However, Beigong Ao still wondered in his mind if Yi Futian was the son of the Great Path. He wondered if Yi Futian was related to Supreme Deity Donglai. He was even able to manipulate the plants here. The aura of the Great Path emanating from Yi Futian's body engulfed the island and turned the area into a Great Path domain. Suddenly, all the hell's lotuses in the area turned towards him and opened up. They swayed about, as if they were pleasantly surprised. The odd and eerie scene made the demon snake's vicious pupils shrink as it stared at Yi Futian. What is going on? You have borrowed the power of death of this domain. Otherwise, your strength would decrease even more. If you bow down to me right now, you may yet live, said Yi Futian to the demon snake. His voice was cold. The demon snake stared at him. What Yi Futian said was true. It did borrow the power of death of the domain. If Yi Futian controlled it, the demon snake's strength would decrease further. The demon snake's eyes were ice cold. Frightening miasma started to spread, filling the sky. There are no illusions here, said Yi Futian to the demon snake. Strands of divine light appeared, and the Great Path domain covered the island. The demon snake's eyes became even colder. A lower Rahuang was actually able to use the Great Path domain to counter its illusion. The more frightening thing was that when the hell's demonic lotus sensed the aura from Yi Futian's body, it seemed to have tried to wrestle itself out of the demon snake's control. The lotus petals opened and shut in Yi Futian's direction, absorbing the aura of the Great Path emanating from Yi Futian's body. Senior Beigong, Yi Futian shouted. Yi Futian stood in the air. Then, the demon emperor said in a cold tone, "You want me to bow down to you? Go to hell." It was a demon emperor on the 8th plane. To have it bow down to a weak human practitioner? How could that be possible? It would rather fight and die here than to experience such ridicule. Boom! A monstrous thunder might was released from Beigong Ao's body. Bathed in the divine light of thunder, his body transformed into the thunder body of the Great Path. He extended his palm. Suddenly, an endless surge of thunder energy converged in front of him, and a purple thunder blade appeared in between both his palms. Beigong Ao held the thunder blade and fixated on a point beneath him. The thunder will in his body poured into the blade, while bolts of horrifying lightning rained from above. Swing! A crisp and deafening sound appeared. The blade cut, and the light of thunder pierced the space in half. Beigong Ao's body moved with the blade. The blade style was an extremely powerful art of supreme thunder attack, recorded in the Dongyuan Pavilion. It was extremely potent. A daunting rumbling sound emerged. Then, the demon snake's body became immeasurably larger. It was huge, even larger than the size of a giant dragon. It looked menacing and formidable. Its body was covered in scales, which made it look like multiple ritual implements were protecting its body. It looked impenetrable. The giant body twirled upwards. Its humongous tail swung towards the thunder blade, creating crisp and loud clanking sounds. The thunder blade slashed downward and crushed its scales, slicing into its flesh directly. The fearsome power of the great path of thunder gushed into its body, destroying the demon snake's internal powers. At the same time, the demon snake's giant body twirled around Baigong Ao. Baigong Ao's expression changed slightly. This demon emperor was going berserk. Bang! He pulled the sword out and rushed away. The moment he pulled the blade out, the demon snake's giant head was constantly releasing a gas that instantly filled the area around them and later spread outwards. The power of the great path was corroded and destroyed. The scary miasma filled the space. The remaining cultivators did not sit idly by. They also released attacks of their own at the demon snake at the same time. Formidable attacks came one after another. The demon snake screeched and roared in anguish while blood splattered all over the place. The fresh blood mixed with the gas in the air. More frightening turning was that the entire area to have synthesized with the power within the gas, which increased the potency of the corrosive powers, making it even scarier. The Hell's demonic lotus continued to open and close. Numerous Hell's lotuses continued to bloom. Fresh blood spilled on them, and, as if the blood had become the fertilizer of the Hell's lotuses, including the Hell's demonic lotus, on the island suddenly grew crazily before they started targeting and eating the people on the island. Careful. The beast uses its blood to grow these Hell's lotuses. A voice called out. A look of realization appeared briefly on Yi Futian's face. He now understood why the demon snake was able to control all the Hell's lotuses. In all these years, the demon snake lived alone on the island. It used its blood as fertilizer to grow these Hell's lotuses, and some sort of relationship was established, and it grew over time. Now the demon snake's blood was spilled on the Hell's lotuses, and it made the lotuses turn crazy. A giant Hell's lotus directly devoured a Renhuang. It slowly devoured the Renhuang's body. The will of death infiltrated the person, and before long, the body of the Renhuang had disappeared. He had become fertilizer for the Hell's lotus. These Hell's lotuses also possessed some of the evilness of the demon snake. Strands of divine light continued to emanate from Yi Futian's body. A chilly aura also accompanied it, as the divine light of Yin was unleashed. The Hell's lotuses froze, but they continued to lean closer to Yi Futian. This created an independent safe space around Yi Futian's body. Can we hide here for the moment? A Renhuang practitioner asked Yi Futian's group. Yes, you may enter, Yi Futian nodded. He did not refuse them. Thank you very much. The Renhuang entered this area, and as expected, he instantly became a lot safer. Many others also came towards Yi Futian's location subsequently. The demon snake was busy as it was engaged in a heated battle with Baigong Ao. However, many of these practitioners were unable to stop the attack of the Hell's demonic lotus. Not long after, many cultivators had run to Yi Futian's side in search of shelter. While many had previously tried to snatch away the Hell's demonic lotus, Yi Futian did not fuss over it. His aura of the great path surrounded this place, and protected them from being attacked by the Hell's lotuses. Then a figure rushed over. It was Yen Daoren, the practitioner they met at the Punglai deity lake. He quietly moved forward, but was still noticed by Emperor Helion. Seeing him approach, Emperor Helion waved his arm and said, "Get lost. There's no place for you here." He went back against his words just because he was afraid of offending Jun Qiuyan, refusing to trade with Yi Futian in public. And now, he wanted to seek protection? While they were generous, it did not mean that they would treat such insult with kindness. Practitioners were very clear with their grievances. They bore grudges. Yen Daoren's expression turned ugly. He looked at Yi Futian and said, "My offense earlier to you was because I had no choice. I hope you can forgive me." When he spoke, a Hell's lotus was moving towards his direction. Yi Futian glanced at, and then ignored him. He was not so generous. Vong. Yen Daoren wanted to rush forward. Yi Futian frowned, and sword will suddenly flew towards him. Yen Daoren's expression changed as he quickly retreated. The sword will flew across the sky, and returned to Yi Futian's side. It was extremely daunting. "You have no place here," Yi Futian replied, and stopped looking at him. He shifted his focus back to the battlefield. Yen Daoren turned around in an attempt to escape. However, the Hell's demonic lotus had already sealed this space. There was no way out. Seeing the Hell's Lotus large enough to cover the sky come at him, Yen Daran became desperate and tried to charge outside regardless. However, before long, he was devoured by the blood-red Hell's Lotuses, and his body slowly disintegrated as the flowers devoured him. He shrieked in despair. He did not want to die in such a miserable way. However, he was powerless to change anything. Yi Futian did not look at him. He continued to look at the battlefield. Beigong Ao, who had broken through to another plane and assimilated the divine thunder item, the cloud wood, was clearly stronger than the demon snake. Under the illumination of his thunder blade, one could see that the number of wounds on the demon snake's body was only increasing. Moreover, the thunder blade style became even more potent as the battle progressed. Formidable thunder streaks continued to wreak havoc on the demon snake's giant body, causing the demon snake's body to tear and break. The large body was already covered in fresh blood. Who knew how many wounds were on its body? I am willing to bow down to you, the demon snake roared. It finally gave in. It seemed like it had understood that there was no way it could turn things around. As its life gradually slipped away, its attachment to life finally trumped its dignity. Kill, Yi Futian said. All right. Beigong Ao nodded. Another thunder slash flew out. It actually cut through and left a frightening rip in the demon snake's giant body. Beigong Ao roared, and the thunder punishment swept towards the demon snake, entering its body. Then, in an instant, the giant demon snake body was consumed by the light of thunder. Its body spasmed and shook uncontrollably. Beigong Ao was naturally not going to let the opportunity slip. He extended his left hand, and the light of thunder punishment surged into the demon snake's body. Under the destructive force of the great path of thunder, the demon snake's giant body was thoroughly destroyed. Before long, it was dead and fell on the ground with a loud thud. A demon emperor of the 8th plane, killed. The people around Yi Futian glanced at him. In their minds many wondered, who was this guy? To be this ruthless. To have refused an 8th plane demon emperor becoming his follower instantly before killing it. The demon snake's body is a treasure in itself. Senior Beigong, take it, said Yi Futian. That's true. Beigong Ao nodded. A demon snake of the 8th plane was covered in treasure. Its scales were comparable to ritual implements. Attacks could hardly penetrate them. As for the fact that Yi Futian refused to forgive the demon snake, he was already used to it. In his mind, perhaps an 8th plane demon emperor was nothing much in Yi Futian's eyes. This meant that while Beigong Ao had broken through to reach the 8th plane, Yi Futian would not and probably did not give it much thought. After all, his vision far exceeded Beigong Ao's imaginations. However, this also made Beigong Ao look forward to following Yi Futian. He wanted to continue following him and see how far this youngster could go. I assume none of you will fight me for the Hell's demonic lotus? Yi Futian asked the people around him. They nodded, clasped their hands together, retreated, and then left. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian and his group were straightforward, picking the island clean of all valuable items before leaving. The deities of Eastern Deity Island invited outsiders to cultivate on the island to provide practitioners to encounter great path opportunities. As such, as the years went by, Eastern Deity Island had been able to gain and maintain a good reputation. Every time Eastern Deity Island sent out invitations, practitioners and cultivators from thousands of different continents would gather on the island. Even if some would lose their lives in the midst of training, they were not without their reasons. The opportunities were there, and whether or not the practitioners could grasp them was up to the practitioners, as the deities of Eastern Deity Island could not simply hand them the prizes on a silver platter. Yi Futian and his group were straightforward, picking the island clean of all valuable items before leaving. The deities of Eastern Deity Island invited outsiders to cultivate on the island to provide practitioners to encounter great path opportunities. As such, as the years went by, Eastern Deity Island had been able to gain and maintain a good reputation. Every time Eastern Deity Island sent out invitations, practitioners and cultivators from thousands of different continents would gather on the island. Even if some would lose their lives in the midst of training, They were not without their reasons. The opportunities were there, and whether or not the practitioners could grasp them was up to the practitioners, as the deities of Eastern Deity Island could not simply hand them the prizes on a silver platter. The Hell's demonic lotus and the other Hell's lotuses were all given to Xia Qingyuan. By refining all of these, Xia Qingyuan's power of the Great Path would reach a new height. How many islands are there within Eastern Deity Island? Yi Futian asked. Many, Beigong Ao replied. He then continued. Back then, Supreme Deity Donglai was a top cultivator. He was the uncrowned king of the Prunglai continent. One could even say the continents around this island treated him with respect. Many people came to visit him every year. Many years ago, the position of Supreme Deity Donglai could truly be regarded as one of a kind. His alchemy ability also increased the influence of Eastern Deity Island. One could say that this place is filled with opportunities. Based on what I know, the wealth of Eastern Deity Island back then was something that most could not fathom. Yi Futian nodded. A top-notch, extraordinary alchemist's influence was something that did not need further explanation. Alchemy grandmasters were already rare. Many people wanted them. So it was easy to understand Supreme Deity Donglai's position and status. Let's go find other opportunities, Yi Futian said. It was a rare opportunity to cultivate. Supreme Deity Donglai is an alchemy grandmaster. Apart from the Great Path opportunities left behind on the island by some other apex existences, there are many locations similar to that of Death Island from earlier. These places have peculiar and interesting plants on them, and hidden within them is the power of the Great Path, which is beneficial to cultivation, said Beigong Ao. He then continued. Back in the day, when I went to this Wudong Island, an island that was filled with Wudong trees, there was also a Wudong Tree King. This Wudong Tree King was the resting place of Supreme Deity Donglai's demonic beast, Igneous Rock Phoenix. The phoenix cultivated the divine fire of Wudong, a frightening divine fire of the Great Path that polarizes life and death. It was also the divine fire of the Great Path that the phoenix used. According to rumors, the divine fire of Wudong is similar to the true fire of the sun. Moreover, it contains the power to regenerate. It was not brought away. Yi Futian asked. Difficult. Beigong Ao shook his head. Wudong Island has a divine beast that guards the island. It is the offspring of the phoenix and it is mighty. I heard that it was already a divine wheel fourth plane many years ago. When I came to Eastern Deity Island last time, it was already a big demon beast at the fifth plane. Divine wheel fifth plane? Big demon beast? Yi Futian said. The divine fire of Wudong is regarded as a divine fire. It is a perfect grade divine flame of the Great Path. Beigong Ao said to Yi Futian while looking at him. Yi Futian suddenly understood. The divine beast phoenix guarding Wudong Island was the equivalent of a person with a perfect grade divine wheel at the fifth plane. Just how powerful was a person who was a perfect grade fifth plane? Earlier, Yi Futian fought against a practitioner from the Empty Mountain with a similar level in the original realm. The practitioner's fists were unparalleled and unshakable. Yi Futian did not even have the strength to fight back. However, the person's cultivation level was higher. He was a perfect grade 6th plane. Based on what he sensed back then, the practitioner could probably defeat an 8-plane existence who had an imperfect divine wheel. This meant that the divine beast phoenix was probably at a similar level. At the very least, cultivators at the 7th plane would not be able to do much to it. Also, it can borrow the power of the divine fire from the Wudong tree, Beigong Ao added. Yi Futian became speechless after hearing that. He still had some thoughts earlier, but now, all his ideas were crushed mercilessly. Even a divine wheel 8th plane facing the phoenix would be dangerous. Yes, Emperor Helion nodded and said, based on my knowledge, a normal 9th plane existence may be able to suppress the phoenix, but it would still be very difficult to take away the divine fire of Wudong. Some top-class apex cultivators who came to the Prunglai continent tried it before. Later, the practitioners fell into despair, and very few even harbor the thought nowadays. Most who come to Wudong Island are here to experience it, in addition to trying to persuade the phoenix. However, they are just dreaming. There is absolutely no practitioner able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the phoenix. Yi Futian had mastered the power of Yin. Naturally, he knew just how frightening the power of Yin was. Then, the true fire of the sun was most just as potent, possessing a destructive force that could burn everything to ashes. The divine fire of Wudong was not that much weaker than the true fire of the sun. This meant that it was definitely an amazingly powerful divine fire of the Great Path. Let's go check it out, said Yi Futian. Bei Gongao nodded. The group then headed toward another location. On their way, they could see many practitioners searching for their own Great Path opportunities all around Eastern Deity Island. Wudong Island was easy to find. From afar, one could easily see an entire island covered in an illusory gold divine flame. The entire island was filled with Wudong trees. Golden rays of light that looked like flames illuminated the island, making it absolutely marvelous. Moreover, a powerful Great Path of fire aura flowed around the island. It felt unreal yet at the same time very vivid. Yi Futian's group accelerated and moved forward. They headed towards the inside of Wudong Island. A heat wave engulfed the entire island. The ethereal Great Path of fire aura filled the air, making things slightly uncomfortable for some. However, to practitioners who cultivated in the Great Path of fire, this could be considered a holy land. They looked forward and could vaguely see a crowd forming. They continued and accelerated even further. The flame aura grew stronger and stronger. Even when they were high up above in the air, they could still feel that scorching air. In the middle of Wudong Island was an independent space. In that space, there was a flame pavilion. On its side was an immeasurably large Wudong tree. Every single leaf of the tree was golden and amber, much like igneous rocks, and the area was flowing with scorching hot air. From afar, Yi Futian could sense a frightening aura coming from the Wudong tree. His divine consciousness wanted to infiltrate it, but he was not yet close, so it was directly destroyed. His divine consciousness could not even get close. On the side of the Wudong tree, a fiery gold-feathered phoenix rested there. It seemed a little lazy, even though many practitioners were in the sky above it. It was so lazy that it did not even glance at them. It looked like it simply did not care. Every 10 years, humans would come. It had already got used to it. Of course, if someone wanted to die, it would not mind as well. Yi Futian looked at the practitioners above the Wudong tree. There were a lot of practitioners. Moreover, compared to the practitioners on Death Island, the people here were much stronger. Among them, several people domineering auras, and they might have been of the 8th plane. If they did not have a little bit of strength, they probably would not have dared to come to this place. When Yi Futian and his group arrived, many glanced at them. However, it was only briefly as they quickly shifted their gaze and ignored the lot. Phoenix, I come from Songhai continent, and I am a practitioner from a top faction on our continent. My divine wheel is also the perfect grade. While not necessarily comparable to Eastern Deity Island, why don't you come with us together outside to train and explore for a while? You must have become bored after cultivating here for so long. Let's go to the outer realms and enjoy the view. At that time, a rather young practitioner said to the phoenix. Named continents were considered decent. At least they were a lot stronger than the continent where the Dongyuan Pavilion was situated. This person possessed a perfect grade divine wheel. He was probably an heir of the strongest faction in Songhai continent, which would explain his confidence and intent to extend an invitation to the phoenix to leave the island. The phoenix glanced at him with a bit of contempt. What kind of cultivation environment could be used to compare with the Eastern Deity Island? Divine Wheel 3rd plane. Even if it was a perfect grade divine wheel, when he broke through the next stage to become a mid-level Renhuang, there was no guarantee that it would stay the same. In fact, there was a high percentage for the divine wheel's grade to drop. Was a person like this worthy enough to invite it to leave the island? Miss Phoenix has exceptional talent. Naturally, you won't be interested in a practitioner who came to train on the island. We do not seek the divine fire. We are simply looking for fate. If Miss Phoenix has anything that she wants, I will definitely do my best to fulfill it, said a practitioner of the 8th plane, who stood beside the youngster just now. While he was at the 8th plane, he spoke courteously, hoping to help his junior find his opportunity. While there was little hope, it would become a huge opportunity for his junior if they were successful. Female. Then a voice emerged. It stunned every cultivator in the sky. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice. Then they saw that the one who spoke was a demonic beast. Yi Futian's mount, a black-winged condor. Many people seemed dumbfounded. They looked at the black-winged condor with a perplexed expression. The phoenix was incredibly prideful. Its parent was the cultivation partner of supreme deity Donglai back in the day. It was ridiculously powerful, and it had been sensing and cultivating the divine fire on Wudong Island over the years. It was very famous. Now a black-winged condor actually called it a female. When Yi Futian heard what his black-winged condor said, 3 black lines appeared on the side of his face. It was a headache. It seemed like this B** had been treated too nicely recently. It had become overconfident. The feathers on the resting phoenix stood up. It raised its head to glance at the black-winged condor. Divine flames could be seen coming out of its pupils. And it also slowly got up. A very fierce look on its face. Little condor became extremely uncomfortable under the phoenix's stare. Its body retreated until it was behind Yi Futian and shrank. This female phoenix sure is fierce. Condor-sama admits he is a loser. As such, Yi Futian appeared within the sights of the phoenix. Yi Futian suddenly had the impulse to smack that bastard dead. A mount caused trouble, and he was the one who would clear things up? This beast is terrible and naughty. It's lacking a little bit of discipline lately. I will most certainly teach it a lesson later. Miss Phoenix, please do not take it to mind. Yi Futian clasped his hands together and bowed slightly to the phoenix. Little Condor caused the issue, so he had no choice but to apologize. After all, that remark was quite disrespectful towards the phoenix. Let it come over, said the phoenix in a human's voice. The sound was crisp but somewhat cold. Scorching air flowed around and engulfed the area, to the point where even the temperature increased. Condor-sama trembled behind Yi Futian. This female phoenix is strong. Condor-sama has no way of beating her. That aura is too vicious. We are in different leagues. Yi Futian felt dismal. He had not yet done anything since getting here. But they had already offended the phoenix. It was a disaster. He initially planned to chat casually with the phoenix and talk about its life. But now, that seemed like a pipe dream. Hand over that vile beast so that we can kill it, said a person on the side. It was the practitioner from the Songhai continent. There was a chance for them to become friendly with the phoenix. They took it, and hoped that it would help leave a good impression for the phoenix. Disrespectful words, it certainly deserves death, said another person. This made Yi Futian frown. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Little Condor made impertinent remarks, so it was normal and made sense that the phoenix would pick on him. However, what does this have to do with anyone else? Little Condor made impertinent remarks, so it was normal and made sense that the phoenix would pick on him. However, what does this have to do with anyone else? The phoenix actually called for Little Condor's death. It's wrong to speak disrespectfully, but must he pay for his mistake with his life? Yi Futian swept his gaze at the person who spoke and spoke. His tone was icy, but his eyes still looked forward. Of course, the former practitioner of the Songhai continent replied. He should be killed, others commented. The Wudong Island was different from other places. They all came here with a request, and the phoenix was already indifferent to them. Now that Yi Futian and the others came, this evil beast actually directly offended the phoenix and badmouthed them. Of course it should die. In that case, you all deserve to die for disrespecting my mount, don't you? Yi Futian looked at them and said coldly. All the practitioners were stunned. Little Condor was disrespectful to the phoenix and deserved to die. But they were also disrespectful to Little Condor. So should they also deserve to die? There seemed to be no issue with the logic. However, his black-winged condor was on a par with the phoenix? Even an evil animal is worthy? Songhai Continent's Renhuang sneered. The white-haired teenager had an extraordinary aura. However, he actually compared his mount with the phoenix, and did not know his place. It seemed like he was a descendant of a top faction from some continent, arrogant and supercilious. As his voice fell, his body actually released a violent will might, covering the direction where Yi Futian and the others were. Although he saw that Yi Futian and the others were from the top faction of a certain continent, he still made his move. Opportunities were scarce nowadays, and he could make use of this to display himself. Maybe they could still have a sliver of opportunity to at least cultivate for a while in front of the divine Wudong tree. His palm grabbed towards the direction of Little Condor. Instantly, a terrifying flame deity-like silhouette appeared on the firmament. Divine fire gathered in the vast great path of space and was extremely violent. They became a war god of flame, created by the flame of the great path. The silhouette came over, and a giant palm of flame appeared, burying the void. They naturally would not mind sounded and definitely would kill it. It was so extremely oppressive. Futian was not from a local faction of the Penglai continent. The surrounding powerful cultivators were a little surprised. Furthermore, they all thought that this person was very decisive there, and attacked without hesitation. The top powerhouse from the Songhai continent was in existence of 8 realms. Even if he could not kill the giant palm of flame grabbed down directly from the firmament already, and the ending was not that important. But at that moment a silhouette blocked him. It was Beigong Ao. Lightning filled the sky and spread towards all directions. Rays of thunder punishment swept out as Beigong Ao raised his palm and slashed out. The palm mark that was slashed out split the space and became a divine thunder blade. With a loud rumble, it split the giant palm of flame from the middle and caused the power of thunder and fire to go rampant in the air. Seeing the two sides fight, the phoenix quietened down. Her crimson eyes swept into the void, looking at the two sides fighting as if it had nothing to do with her. Hand that demon over, and we won't pursue the matter. The powerhouse of 8 realms from the Songhai continent floated in midair, and his flame war godlike body was extremely high and mighty as he looked down at Yi Futian and the rest. Yi Futian raised his eyes to sweep towards the other side. They were using him to make the phoenix laugh? Since that was the case, he would play along with them. Senior Beigong, if they attack again, kill them. Yi Futian spoke coldly as he retaliated powerfully. Yes, Pavilion Master, Beigong Ao replied. Hearing him address Yi Futian in that way, their opponent's expression turned weird. Pavilion Master? Did he inherit a top faction from some continent? However, that was irrelevant. Kill. The powerful cultivator's divine consciousness engulfed the sky. Instantly, even more violent flame, auras of the Great Way exploded forth. The vast space turned into a flaming great path domain, and like a terrifying great flame matrix, it refined everything in its path. Within that great path domain, countless runes of flames appeared. They were the words fire, flare, blaze. Every rune contained an extremely horrifying destructive power. At that moment, Yi Futian and the rest were all engulfed in the great flame matrix. The runes fell towards them, as if they were going to burn the space they were in. Insolent, Beigong Ao also released a terrifying aura of the Great Way. A towering war god of thunder-like figure appeared and fused with his body, which also had cloudwood fused into it. In a flash, countless rays of lightning appeared in the vast firmament, casting a light screen of lightning. It held up the great flame matrix, and made it so that the flames of the way could not reach Yi Futian and the others. Boom! Divine thunder descended and shot towards the opposing practitioners. Both sides had an equal number of people enter the Eastern Deity Island. An Eastern Deity token could only bring 10 people in. The surrounding powerful cultivators all moved aside. At the same time, they released strong auras of the Great Way to resist the aftershocks of the battle. If the strong cultivators from the Songhai continent were just trying to show off just now, the two sides' strength and words made them all get fired up, and a war broke out. Buzz! Beigong Ao's body directly transformed into a ray of lightning and rushed towards the other side. He was so fast that it was hard to see him with the naked eye. With a loud bang, the ray of lightning soared into the sky. Both of their bodies flew directly into the sky, and even the horrifying Great Path domain flew up into the sky as well. In an instant, the destructive might disappeared, and the two figures appeared in the sky. The other party did not care. When fighting Beigong Ao, their lineup was slightly stronger than their opponents. However, Beigong Ao also thought so. With Yi Futian here, It would bring a surprise to the other side. The rest of the cultivators stepped out at the same time, coming directly towards Yi Futian. There were 2 cultivators at the 7th order of the Divine Wheel. And Emperor Helion stepped on the void and went up. Yi Futian swept a glance at Yang Dongqing, who was indifferent at the back, and said, "Senior Yang, thank you." When Yang Dongqing heard Yi Futian's words, he could only grit his teeth and take action. He had been following Yi Futian all this time, and he was now a bit guilty. He found that Yi Futian was very frightening and increasingly mysterious. Although he had never really fought head-on with his full strength, according to Yang Dongqing's estimations, he might be able to hold his own against a strong cultivator at the 7th order of the Divine Wheel. The others also attacked, and a war erupted at that moment. The young man who wanted to invite the phoenix to cultivate with him previously swept his eyes towards Yi Futian and the others. He had an ethereal aura on his body, and arrogant yet indifferent eyes. It was as if he did not care about the people below. A terrifying flame breath swept out, and a terrifying great path furnace seemed to appear behind him, from which a steady stream of divine flames of the great path spilled down, covering the space. The great path furnace was his divine wheel of the great path. It was incorporated into the ritual implement, and could be refined into flames of the way, causing it to get stronger continuously. The golden flames of the way had a terrifying melting power, and wherever it passed by, the great way was melted into nothingness. In an instant, with his body as the center, the vast area was filled with divine flames, and a terrifying stream of flames of the way directly surged towards Yi Futian's body, instantly engulfing Yi Futian and the black wind condor behind him. A touch of coldness flashed in his proud eyes. However, the black wind condor behind Yi Futian was looking up at him, as though he was looking at a pitiful person. This guy, he dared to attack his master. He was only at the level of a lower Renhuang. He probably thought he was peerless because he had a perfect divine wheel. How miserable. I'm afraid he would not even know how he died. Yi Futian swept a glance at him, and felt a flame current enter his body. However, it did not affect him in the slightest. Whoosh! Suddenly, an incomparably sharp sword will blossomed from his body, and slashed directly across the void straight towards the other party. The teenage Renhuang instantly felt a strong sense of threat. The sword will slashed through the firmament and headed straight for him. His body was blasted backward as monstrous divine flames spread in front of him. His divine will also smashed towards the front to block the sword will. But as the sword will sliced through, a brilliant sword river seemed to appear, freezing and shattering everything in its path. Bang! The divine wheel of the great path immediately shattered into pieces. The wisp of sword will pierced through the divine wheel as the practitioner's face instantly turned pale. He grunted as blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. A thought appeared in his mind. How is this possible? His perfect divine will could only take one sword will? However, he could only have that thought. In the next moment, the sword will pierced through his body. As his body trembled violently, wisps of sword chi went rampant in his body, and he could feel his body being ripped apart. No! A roar was heard, and in the next moment, his body was shattered by the sword chi and disintegrated. The surrounding people were stunned. Everything happened so fast that many people could not react, and when they looked back, they found that the heir to the top faction of the Songhai continent was directly obliterated by a sword will. Was he dead? Everyone had a strange look on their face, and were a little startled. He was killed just like that. As someone who owned a perfect grade divine wheel, he could be considered a top talent. He thought he could easily suppress Yi Futian, but in a momentary clash he was killed. The cultivators of the Songhai continent were all fighting. They looked in the direction of the young man, and their faces all turned pale. All this happened so fast that they had no time to react. The people who were thinking of killing the black wind condor were now also looking that way, and some thoughts were arising in their minds. It was true that when outside, it was better to keep a low profile. After all, you never know who you would meet. No matter how you look at it, someone with a perfect grade divine will could always be considered a top demon. Even if they could not be killed, it did not have to come to this point. But reality was that dreamy. The practitioners of the Songhai continent must feel regretful now. Of course, they would also feel anger. Above the firmament, a terrifying collision sounded. Two top figures were still fighting, and the man of 8 realms also knew that his heir had been killed. When the collision occurred, his body's blood force rolled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The phoenix raised her head and gazed up at the battle in the sky. She actually seemed somewhat interested in the battle, especially towards Futian. Although Futian's mount had spoken disrespectfully, ever since Futian arrived here, he had presented himself with due respect. He had apologized on behalf of his mount, and yet was unapologetic to the people who raved on about killing his mount. The phoenix raised her head and gazed up at the battle in the sky. She actually seemed somewhat interested in the battle, especially towards Futian. Although Futian's mount had spoken disrespectfully, ever since Futian arrived here, he had presented himself with due respect. He had apologized on behalf of his mount, and yet was unapologetic to the people who raved on about killing his mount. Futian had stood there quietly, not revealing his hand. Yet when he did, he was as swift as lightning, instantly killing off the other party. He had attacked decisively and mercilessly without any hesitation. There was more to this white-haired youth than met the eye. At the very least, he was the most interesting cultivator she had seen so far. He might also be the most outstanding, even though his cultivation was not the highest. After the youth died, a few members from the Songhai continent charged towards Futian. However, a sword realm that filled the sky appeared, with Futian's figure as its center. The sword will in the sky resonated, and a river of swords swept towards the other party. Within the river of swords, 3 beams of sky-piercing sword light coalesced, seemingly forming 3 swords. They were 3 sword wills. Swooshing sounds could be heard continuously. All the members who were charging towards him were killed on the spot, perishing instantly. The river of swords surged forward. Very quickly, only 3 members from the party from the Songhai continent remained alive. They were the three cultivators battling against Beigong Ao, Emperor Helian, and Yang Dongqing respectively. One of them was an 8th tier, whereas the other two were 7th tier. The cultivators from the Songhai continent might be wiped out. Many cultivators thought to themselves as they watched the battle. They initially thought that even if the cultivators from the Songhai continent could not kill Black Wind Condor, they would at least be able to suppress their opponents. However, they never imagined that the battle would be so one-sided, and that the cultivators from the Songhai continent would instead be suppressed by their opponents. Yi Futian had immediately killed off all the members below the upper-level Renhuang plain. They were in such a miserable state. Many people were thinking to themselves, if the members from the Songhai continent had known that they would end up in such a state, they would never have stepped out. The cultivators who had previously claimed that they would kill Little Condor were also secretly cautious. However, they had not made a move, and hence, Yi Futian would not attack them just because of what they said. The three sword wills continued to charge out into the sky, aiding Emperor Helian, who was in battle. These three sword wills could already terrorize a 7th tier Renhuang. In tandem with Emperor Helian's attack, the opponent was swiftly killed off. After that, the three sword wills then swept over towards Yang Dongqing's battlefield. In the blink of an eye, aside from the prideful 8th tier figure, the other two cultivators were all killed off. The 8th tier cultivator was also being suppressed by Beigong Ao. His body contains a divine item, someone said. It is a lightning attribute divine item. Based on what I know, it can be found on one of the islands of Eastern Deity Island, another person said. For many of them, this was not their first time entering Eastern Deity Island. Hence, they had some knowledge regarding this. Cloudwood, as expected, someone else immediately responded. Yes, it is Cloudwood. The person replied as he nodded his head. Cloudwood contains powerful lightning attributes and can absorb the power of lightning of the Great Path, causing it to be even more powerful. Now that it has been merged with his body, this person can be considered to have a body of lightning of the Great Path. He is more powerful than ordinary 8th tier figures. The situation on the battlefield became clearer. Beigong Ao was firmly suppressing his opponent. This made Yi Futian, who originally wanted to lend him a hand, watch quietly from the sidelines. In the battlefield high in the sky, the enraged 8th tier cultivator from the Songhai continent had previously wanted to surround and kill Yi Futian. However, right now he was already at the end of his rope. Not long after, a palm, filled with raging lightning, immediately pierced through his body of flames. It then frenziedly exploded and destroyed him bit by bit. He has been slain. The crowd felt their hearts tremble as they watched the battlefield in the sky. After Beigong Ao slaughtered his opponent, he also took away his opponent's storage ring. This caused the eyes of many people to twitch. Did this fellow not have any dignity as an 8th tier cultivator? Beigong Ao did not mind them at all. Be it 7th or 8th tier, they could still make do in their own territories, but in the divine prefecture, they also had to scrape by. One could only be arrogant if they were a deity and were invincible. Since they had to scrape by, why did they need to keep up appearances? Of course, benefits would be their number one priority. Beigong Ao's will swept over the treasures in the storage ring. He revealed a knowing smile. He was satisfied with his spoils. The surrounding cultivators were speechless when they saw his smile. However, they felt their hearts shiver. The cultivators of the Songhai continent had been wiped out. Not a single one of them remained. This was the result of trying to stand out. The crowd secretly reminded themselves that on Eastern Deity Island, even if the opponents appeared easy to deal with, one still needed to be cautious. Otherwise, they would be caught off guard. This group had been an example. Yi Futian seemed composed, as though his emotions were unaffected by the events happening around him. At the very least, his gaze remained as calm as still water, just like when he arrived. His temperament was gentle too. However, when the crowd thought of how he attacked just now, they were wary of him. People like Yi Futian were the scariest. Moreover, Yi Futian only had a third-tier divine wheel now. By the time he advanced to be an upper-level Renhuang, who could stand against him? Could it be that Yi Futian was a descendant of one of the super mighty figures? Yi Futian saluted the phoenix with his fists, saying, My name is Yi Liuonian. It is said that this place contains the divine fire of the Great Path, so I have come here to check it out. I did not expect that this beast would make such impertinent remarks and cause this commotion. I apologize for disturbing Miss Phoenix. He was very polite, causing people to feel comfortable being around him. It was as though he was a completely different person from the white-haired youth who sent out an attack just now. Quickly, come over here and apologize, Yi Futian ordered while turning around and sweeping a glance at Black Wind Condor. Black Wind Condor quivered and obediently moved forward. He said to the phoenix, Condor-sama apologizes for being ignorant. The crowd was confused. Condor-sama? Was the brain of this fellow not fully developed? That shouldn't be. He was already a demon emperor. Smack! A crisp slap sounded. Yi Futian smacked Black Wind Condor with his palm until the latter fell down. A few of his feathers came off. Yi Futian's mind was linked with Black Wind Condor's. Hence Yi Futian knew what he was thinking. This brute had purposely said so because he was reluctant to apologize to the phoenix. Asking me, Condor-sama, to apologize to this phoenix? Sooner or later, I will mount her and make her my ride. Humph. If I show any inferiority now, what would happen when this female phoenix is tamed by master in the future? Who will be the senior between the two of us? Condor-sama was in a dilemma. Feeling wronged, little Condor raised his head and looked at Yi Futian. Even with foresight, a condor would still have immediate worries. What he considered was a legitimate concern. This female phoenix was so ferocious. Most likely, he would not be able to win a fight against her. I am too lenient in disciplining him. I will surely discipline him well after this, Yi Futian said, smiling apologetically at the phoenix. Cease your acting. The phoenix cast an indifferent glance at Yi Futian and Black Wind Condor. She revealed a look of disdain. These two were hypocrites. What's your intention for coming here? Are you here for the divine fire of Wudong as well? Asked the phoenix. She did not mention what happened just now. Obviously, she had decided to put the matter behind and let Black Wind Condor get away with his disrespectful speech. The rest of the cultivators all revealed strange expressions. Before this, when they arrived, the phoenix had laid dormant below the Wudong, and she didn't even spare them a glance. Now her attitude had changed. When the cultivators of Songhai continent risked their lives to fight with Yi Futian, they did so with the intention of demonstrating their best to attract the attention of the phoenix. However, judging from her response, it seemed like they had instead helped Yi Futian to win her favor. This was a tragedy. The divine fire of Wudong is crowned the divine fire. Naturally, cultivators will covet it. I am sure everyone is here for it. However, personally speaking, it is not that precious to me, Yi Futian responded. You're boasting shamelessly. The phoenix glanced at Yi Futian. The divine fire of Wudong was not that precious? This divine fire was bred on this Wudong by her father. It contained two major wills of the Great Path, life and death. It reigned supreme over all the other flames of the way, and was crowned the real divine fire. Let alone a cultivator with a third-tier divine wheel. Even a cultivator at the 9th tier would covet the divine fire as well. Her great path was flawless, and her cultivation was already at the middle-level Renhuang plane. However, she still needed to rely on the divine fire to cultivate. That way in the future, when she proved her way and became an upper-level demon emperor, she could maintain her flawless great path. If Miss Phoenix does not believe me, you can give it a try. Yi Futian stepped forward and descended before the phoenix. He extended his hand, and currents emanated from his palm. The phoenix swept a glance at him. This person was truly daring. Wasn't he afraid of her incinerating him? Understanding Yi Futian's intention, the phoenix transformed into her human form. She was clad in feathers and appeared extremely beautiful. Her appearance was also very outstanding. She bore an enchanting air and had a voluptuous figure. Her beauty was captivating. She similarly extended her hand. Her hand met Yi Futian's. Flames of the way spread out from her palm and entered into Yi Futian's arm. Buzz! In an instant, their arms were enveloped in an aura that alternated between hot and cold temperatures. There was the light of cold ice as well as the light of flames. The expression of the phoenix changed slightly. She looked into Yi Futian's eyes. This was the extreme chill of the power of Yin. Yi Futian retracted his hand. The phoenix similarly lowered her arm. The look that she gave Yi Futian contained a hint of astonishment. The surrounding cultivators all looked towards the two of them. Their eyebrows all lifted slightly. They sensed the extremely cold and hot aura. It was like cold ice and flames. What do you think? Yi Futian asked. Even so, this does not mean that you do not covet the divine fire of Wudong. The phoenix coldly snorted. Yi Futian smiled and said, I have told Miss Phoenix just now. I have heard that this place possesses the divine fire. And therefore, I have come to experience it myself. I have no other intentions. However, seeing the scenery here, it perfectly fits a song. Would Miss Phoenix be interested in hearing me play a tune? The phoenix looked at Yi Futian. What was this fellow up to? A song? She was not interested. She did not like men who acted all artsy. Suit yourself, the phoenix proudly said. She wanted to see what Yi Futian planned to do. The people in midair knew that Yi Futian had succeeded in drawing her attention when they heard her say this. He had piqued her curiosity. This fellow, could it be that it was because he was handsome? Could it be that the phoenix also judged people based on appearance? Yi Futian walked up to the Wudong and sat down cross-legged. His movements were elegant and natural. His white hair and white robes gave off an otherworldly air. His approach was brilliant. Condor-sama exclaimed internally while looking at Yi Futian. Master was indeed worthy of his title. He was smart. Black-winged Condor stared at the beautiful phoenix and thought, Phoenix, Master is not after your flame. Instead, he wants both you and your divine fire. A guqin appeared. Yi Futian placed all 10 of his slender fingers on the strings and plucked them. Instantly, the notes came alive and transformed into a beautiful melody. Yi Futian was playing the flight of the phoenix pair. Beneath the Wudong, its leaves fluttered and seemed to be drawn towards the sound of the guqin. They fluttered towards Yi Futian, constantly swaying in the wind. An illusion of a phoenix appeared and circled around Yi Futian, beginning to dance. Hearing the wonderful melody, the phoenix stood at her spot stunned. She felt completely absorbed into the realm of the sounds of the guqin. It was so pleasing to the ear. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The ancient Wudong's golden leaves swayed. The circling phoenix illusions played and chased around. The sound of the guqin was as crisp as the call of the phoenix. The youth with white hair dressed in white robes was absorbed in playing his tune. This all seemed like a scene from a flawless painting. It was mesmerizing. Even powerful renhuangs were still amazed at the beauty of this scene. It was a sight to behold. The ancient Wudong's golden leaves swayed. The circling phoenix illusions played and chased around. The sound of the guqin was as crisp as the call of the phoenix. The youth with white hair dressed in white robes was absorbed in playing his tune. This all seemed like a scene from a flawless painting. It was mesmerizing. Even powerful renhuangs were still amazed at the beauty of this scene. It was a sight to behold. Yi Futian's temperament was originally handsome and refined. His young self had now matured, adding on some charm. He seemed like a sage playing the guqin. What was even more astonishing was that the ancient Wudong seemed to comprehend the sounds of the guqin. It let out a rustling sound as its leaves kept swaying and approaching Yi Futian. It seemed as though the Wudong wanted to get close to Yi Futian. It gave off the feeling as though it understood the sounds of the guqin. It resonated with it and wanted to dance. From the ancient Wudong, currents of the great path flowed towards Yi Futian's figure. Gradually, Yi Futian's figure was enveloped by the brilliant light of a divine flame. The light of this flame was very faint and ethereal. It was not real fire. Yet, it seemed as though Yi Futian was draped in a robe of flame. He appeared even more extraordinary. Right now Yi Futian was like a proud son of flame. The phoenix, who had been quietly listening to the tune all this while, was stunned when she saw this bizarre scene. Only then did she realize that the divine fire of Wudong actually had an affinity with Yi Futian. The Wudong itself was also approaching him. This made her reveal a strange expression. She had initially been relaxed, but now she was wary again. It was said that many of the human cultivators were cunning. Could it be that this person was purposely using a song to make her let her guard down? so that he could use a special technique to snatch her divine fire? A terrifying light of the divine fire of the way shone in her eyes. She shot a beam towards Futian. She had strong cultivation. Even though there were many cultivators around now, she doubted anyone here could defeat her. As for Futian, his aura of the Great Path was perfect, but she was still confident that if she attacked first, she could seize the initiative and even kill Futian. She would attack as soon as Futian dared to make any strange moves. However, she discovered that Futian kept playing his tune on the guqin quietly. As he played, he seemed completely immersed in it, entering a state of ecstasy. He even closed his eyes. The wutong swayed, and the divine fire of the Great Path danced. All this seemed to be their natural response. Something about this youth attracted them. The youth himself was an extraordinary figure. The phoenix noticed that Futian did not react to her threat, and still continued to play the guqin quietly. The melody was so mellifluous, she felt like dancing along with the music. The Flight of the Phoenix pair was originally a song about phoenixes. It could resonate with phoenixes. As she listened to the song, she naturally reacted to it. Yet due to her powerful cultivation, she could still restrain herself. The effects of the song were not very strong on her. She merely felt that the sounds of the guqin were very beautiful. The sounds of the guqin gradually lowered to a bass tone. The illusion of the phoenixes still danced, but their movements became slower. All good things came to an end. In this scene from a painting, the phoenixes returned to their nest and rested below the wudong. All was peaceful and good. When the sounds of the guqin stopped, this scene did not disappear. This scene seemed to be imprinted in the minds of the various cultivators here. It was unforgettable. The look that the phoenix gave Futian revealed a remorseful look of self-blame. She had actually believed that Futian was planning to steal her divine fire. From the looks of it, she had misjudged him. I hope Miss Phoenix was entertained, Futian said as he smiled gently. The phoenix nodded her head slightly as she asked, "The artistic conception is beautiful. What song is this?" "The Flight of the Phoenix pair," Futian replied. "The Flight of the Phoenix pair." The phoenix mumbled to herself. As expected, it was a song about phoenixes. No wonder her emotions resonated with the tune. "How did you make the ancient wudong and the divine fire also respond?" the phoenix asked. "It could be related to my special cultivation," Futian answered with a smile. "I have cultivated the way of flame. I have also cultivated the wood attribute, as well as the power of life and death." When the phoenix heard him say this, she revealed a strange look. The cultivators in the sky similarly had strange expressions. It naturally did not need to be mentioned that this person had extraordinary talent. He had forged a flawless divine wheel, and had extremely powerful combat ability. It was apparent when he instantly killed a possessor of a flawless divine wheel at the same plane as he was, as well as when he aided in killing the 7th-tier cultivator. Yet from what he had said, this was only the tip of the iceberg of his abilities. He was proficient in multiple powers. His accomplishments in playing the guqin were also profound. What was even more frightening was that, unbeknownst when, he had actually caused the proud phoenix, who had ignored the others, to view him as an equal. They were casually chatting with each other. This meant that he had already succeeded in making the phoenix lower her guard. The phoenix was willing to communicate with him. This was what the others had been trying to do before this. Yet no one knew how to do so, and the phoenix was completely ignoring them. When the phoenix heard what Futian said, she gently nodded her head. No wonder the wutong and the divine fire were attracted to him. That meant that Futian's cultivation attributes were similar to that of the wutong and the divine fire. However, she knew that it might not be as simple as Futian had made it sound. Aside from her father, no one could understand the wutong and the divine fire as well as she could. For them to have reacted to Futian, they must have encountered an extremely high power. This meant that aside from the power of Futian still mastered other powers that could cause the divine fire of wudong to merge within and resonate with. This person's cultivation talent might be far more terrifying than what he had displayed. The phoenix also had extraordinary talent. Although she had always remained on Eastern Deity Island and relied on her talents and the divine fire to cultivate to this day, she was not a fool. She understood many things, and could make some speculations. I came to Eastern Deity Island to gain experience. I still wish to seek out other fateful encounters, so I will not continue disturbing Miss Phoenix, Futian said. He actually bid farewell immediately. This bewildered the surrounding cultivators. They looked at Futian with looks of surprise. They initially believed that Futian would use this opportunity to continue getting familiar with the Phoenix, and then invite her to leave the island. After all, the Phoenix guarded Wudong Island, but she would not stay here forever. They all still had a chance to invite her to leave the island with them. The Phoenix was also stunned as she looked at Futian. She then nodded her head slightly and replied, "All right. Farewell." Futian greeted as he saluted with his fists. He then flew up into the air in a flash and landed on the back of Black Wind Condor. He glanced down at the Phoenix. He saw that she was looking at him. He smiled and nodded his head. Then, Black Wind Condor spread his wings and flew out, leaving this place. Baigong Ao gave Futian a deep gaze, and then followed behind him and also left. Very quickly, Futian's group left Wudong Island, their figures disappearing into the distance. After the Phoenix saw him leave, she suddenly felt down. She stared off into the distant sky. "Miss Phoenix," someone cried out. Only then did the Phoenix regain her senses. She glanced over at the crowd. Her gaze became stern once again. However, she seemed to have lost interest once more. She returned to the Wudong and transformed back into her original form. She rested there, and planned to ignore the crowd. Her eyes closed slightly. She seemed to dwell into deep thought. All these years, she had remained guarding here. In reality, she was very lonely. She had no friends and no one to keep her company. Although there were people from Eastern Deity Island who would come to visit her, they either came for her father's sake, or because they had their own intentions. Every 10 years, Eastern Deity Island would become livelier. She was proud, cold, unapproachable, and ignored the masses, but she felt empty inside. Futian's appearance made her feel a sense of warmth. This interaction was like the interaction between friends and companions. His talents were also extraordinary, and he had no ulterior motives against her. This moved her. For so many years, she had guarded this place with another goal in mind. She was seeking a cultivator who could keep her company and become her human companion. The island lord told her that if the day came when she found such a person, she could leave the island to cultivate. However, that person had to be sufficiently outstanding. Futian seemed qualified. Hence, she was contemplating leaving the island with him. "Miss Phoenix, although my place is no match for Eastern Deity Island, it is still in the outside world. Miss Phoenix has always been cultivating here. Surely you must have gotten weary of this place? If Miss Phoenix is willing to leave the island, my forces are willing to serve Miss Phoenix," an upper-level Renhuang proclaimed. He already claimed to want to serve the Phoenix. It was apparent how much he wanted to obtain her and make her leave the island. A flawless 5th-tier demon was already very frightening. If she broke through another 2 planes, she would definitely become a peak existence. Adding on the divine fire of Wudong, she would be absolutely terrifying. Who didn't want her to follow them and leave the island? Even if they had to serve her, as though she was an ancestor of theirs, they would allow her to do what she wanted without hindrance. The Phoenix opened her eyes and swept a glance at them. She then slowly got up and said, "You are right." As she said this, the Phoenix lifted her head and called out into the sky. In an instant, an extremely loud call of the Phoenix swept over Eastern Deity Island. For a moment, countless wutongs on Wudong Island swayed and shook. Rustling sounds could be heard constantly, coming from all directions. People rose into the air consecutively, heading towards Wudong Island. The hearts of many goddesses on Eastern Deity Island shuddered when they heard this sound. Their beautiful gazes turned towards the direction of Wudong Island. This was the call of the Phoenix. The Phoenix was about to leave the island. After so many years, had she finally made her decision? Who was it? What sort of monstrous existence made the Phoenix decide to leave the island? The cultivators of Eastern Deity Island were most familiar with the abilities of the Phoenix. One had to make her submit in order for her to want to leave the island. In the distance, Futian's group, who were traversing the sky, also heard the call of the Phoenix. They turned around, and looked in the direction of the call. Why is the phoenix calling out? Emperor Helion mumbled to himself. Should we go back and take a look? There is no need, Yi Futian replied. Beigong Ao looked at the white-haired silhouette in front of him and asked, Pavilion Master, you did not say anything and chose to leave. Was it so that you can apprehend her later? Yi Futian shook his head. It seemed that he and Beigong Ao were on the same page. However, what was there to apprehend? If the phoenix did not want to leave the island, she would not do so no matter how hard he tried. His abilities were insufficient to coerce her. On the other hand, if she herself intended to leave the island, it did not need to be mentioned at all. Many things were better left unsaid. The flight of the phoenix pair could express so many things in just one song. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. On the main island of Eastern Deity Island, there was a building that towered like an imperial palace. On Dengxian Tower, a peerless woman with a crown of phoenix feathers and a rainbow-colored gown sat on a throne. She bore an authoritative aura and appeared to be a noble empress. She seemed too high to be approached. On the main island of Eastern Deity Island, there was a building that towered like an imperial palace. On Dengxian Tower, a peerless woman with a crown of phoenix feathers and a rainbow-colored gown sat on a throne. She bore an authoritative aura and appeared to be a noble empress. She seemed too high to be approached. This woman was the current island lord of Eastern Deity Island. She rarely appeared in public. Very few people knew that the current Eastern Deity Island lord was an absolute beauty with a stunning appearance. As she sat there, it was as though all the beauty in the world was focused on her. Even though many goddesses were standing below her, and all of them had outstanding appearances, no one could overshadow her radiance. Her beautiful eyes were piercing as she gazed into the distance. Everything on Eastern Deity Island appeared in her mind like a mirror. Nothing could escape her sight. A divine light flashed from her glabella and became an illusory silhouette. Surprisingly, it was the silhouette of Yi Futian. The surrounding women looked towards the illusory figure. Eastern Deity Island Lord said, "This person's name is Yi Lionian. Where did he come from? And who invited him onto the island?" To her side, many cultivators began to check their records. In an instant, countless images were presented. With the Eastern Deity token, everything was recorded and archived. Very quickly, they found what they were looking for. Someone bowed and answered, "Yi Lionian is from Dongyuan Pavilion on a nameless continent. As he is the Dongyuan Pavilion Master, Bai Mu extended him an invitation." The woman nodded her head slightly. She then said, "Inform Bai Mu that she no longer needs to be responsible for others under her. She only needs to keep tabs on this person, and must make him stay on Eastern Deity Island. Besides that, immediately send people to Dongyuan Pavilion to investigate everything about Yi Lionian." Understood. Someone bowed and received the order. The woman then shifted her gaze in another direction. In a low voice she said, "Zifeng has come." She had barely said this when a brilliant light rained down. The appearance of a beautiful woman followed it. The surrounding people were already used to such a scene. Not many people on Eastern Deity Island dared to appear before the island lord in such a manner. Zifeng was definitely one of the few who dared to do so. Back then, her father was the companion of Supreme Deity Donglai. The members of Eastern Deity Island naturally gave her preferential treatment. Many people believed that Zifeng ought to become the demonic beast companion of the island lord. However, unbeknownst why, the island lord had allowed Zifeng to cultivate on her own. She showed no intention of making Zifeng her demonic beast companion, instead allowing Zifeng to wait for someone she was willing to cultivate with. Many people did not understand the intentions of the island lord. Zifeng had such outstanding talent. If an outsider were to take her away, wouldn't that be a huge loss for Eastern Deity Island? "Zifeng, come and sit here," the island lord said to the phoenix with a smile. The air of authority around her immediately disappeared, and she seemed like a noble and gentle senior. "Elder sister, I have found my companion," the phoenix said. She referred to the island lord as elder sister. "I saw." The island lord acknowledged as she nodded her head and smiled. "Have you made your decision?" Across so many years, there has not been anyone more suitable than he is, the phoenix continued. Island Lord nodded her head gently. She then said, since you have already decided, I will support your decision. However, I will still need to see how this person's character is like. I have already sent people to investigate him. If there are no problems, you can bring along the divine fire of Wudong as you follow him and cultivate together. He should also be able to absorb the divine fire of Wudong, the phoenix mumbled. That won't do. The divine fire of Wudong needs to be in your charge, the Island Lord said in a serious tone, becoming sterner as she said this. The phoenix nodded her head as she acknowledged this like an obedient young maiden. She did not appear as proud and majestic as she did when she was under the Wudong. When the Island Lord saw the phoenix's attitude, she revealed a warm and gentle smile again. She said, Alright Zifeng. Normally, I have been too busy cultivating and have had little time to keep you company. Now that you have already determined your own path, you no longer need to remain on this island in the future. Come, let's have a nice long chat. The phoenix nodded her head, walked up to the Island Lord's side and sat down. Towards this elder sister of hers, she showed due respect. Above the sea of the path of Eastern Deity Island, Bai Mu was with a group of Eastern Deity Island cultivators. At that moment, she received the orders from the Island Lord. She was slightly alarmed and somewhat astonished for an instant. Dongyuan Pavilion Master Yi Lionian had already drawn the attention of the Island Lord. That meant that Bai Mu's previous decision was correct as expected. When Jun Qiuyan and Yi Futian were at odds with each other, she had asked Jun Qiuyan to let the matter go, and had kept Yi Futian from being harassed by the former. Before this, she believed that with Yi Futian's talent, it might be an opportunity for him. If he could draw the attention of Eastern Deity Island, he would be protected in the future, and would not need to worry about Jun Qiuyan. However, Bai Mu never imagined that it had happened so soon, and he had immediately caught the eye of the Island Lord. How many people had been handpicked by the Island Lord? Would Yi Futian be the next? What had he done now? Regardless, Yi Futian had not disappointed her. He had even surprised her. The intention of the Island Lord was also that Bai Mu only needed to keep an eye out solely for Yi Futian in the future. She did not need to look out for other potential candidates. Bai Mu stepped forward and flew across the sky, heading out to find Yi Futian. After some time, she saw Yi Futian's silhouette. It was not just Yi Futian. In front of them there were many people. It was rather lively. Many cultivators who had entered Eastern Deity Island had gathered together. Yi Futian's group had also stopped here, not advancing further. Before them was a white mist that blocked off their wills. Based on what Emperor Helion shared with them, the outskirts of the core island of Eastern Deity Island was in front of them. There would be more fateful encounters of the Great Path, and they would all be concentrated in one domain. By passing through this domain, they could reach the core island of Eastern Deity Island. This domain had another name. It was called the Illusory Sky Domain. Everything was surreal. The various cultivators who entered Eastern Deity Island were gathered here. There were usually outbreaks of fighting between the various forces, due to disputes over treasure, and there would always be severe casualties. People with ordinary levels of cultivation would not dare to enter this domain. Even though they would not be able to enter Core Island, they were fine with it. Discovering fateful encounters of the Great Path in the outskirts was not a bad alternative. After all, Eastern Deity Island invited the cultivators from thousands of continents. Although they were all top figures of their respective continents, there was still a disparity between the strong and the weak. Not everyone had such huge ambition as to step onto the core island of Eastern Deity Island. For many Renhuangs, the fateful encounters in the outskirts were enough. Before this, Yi Futian had already reaped many benefits in the outskirts. Of course, many people could not achieve what he did outside. The Illusory Sky Domain is the true trial left by Eastern Deity Island for the cultivators. There are many fateful encounters of the Great Path within. I entered it before and barely made it out alive. Beigong Ao warned Yi Futian. His expression was stern. Even though his cultivation had undergone a metamorphosis, had proven his way up to the 8th tier, and had the cloudwood, he was still serious and stern about this. After entering into the illusory sky domain, it would no longer be like the outskirts where the various cultivators were dispersed. Instead, the top cultivators of various islands would appear in the same domain to compete. Do you want to go in? Beigong Ao asked Futian. They had already been to many islands. From Beigong Ao's point of view, the benefits that they had reaped were definitely not insignificant. They could still visit other islands. However, Futian seemed to not be interested in them. Futian wanted to go to Core Island. Hence Beigong Ao had brought him here. Past the illusory sky domain was Core Island. However, the cultivators of Eastern Deity Island had special means to directly pass through this domain. This illusory sky domain was intentionally set up for outsiders like them. Futian replied as he nodded his head. He also wanted to see how many fateful encounters he would come across in there. Pavilion Master Yi. A voice called out to him right then. Futian turned towards the person who had arrived. He smiled and asked, "Goddess, why have you come?" The beautiful figure who had arrived was Bai Mu. "We were originally unoccupied. We primarily came to see the performance of the people who entered the island. We just happened to meet Pavilion Master Yi here, so we came over." Bai Mu answered softly. "Pavilion Master Yi, are you preparing to enter the illusory sky domain?" Futian replied as he nodded his head. "Since I have come here, I will naturally want to venture into it. Based on what I know, among the cultivators who came to Eastern Deity Island, almost 1/4 of them have already entered the illusory sky domain. This is especially so for the members of the major forces who came here before. Their immediate goal was the illusory sky domain. It can be said that all the powerful cultivators are in there." Bai Mu told Futian. "The top forces of the Penglai continent are naturally also there. Pavilion Master Yi, after you enter the domain, you must be careful." Futian naturally understood who the other party was referring to. Jun Xiuyan had also entered the illusory sky domain. "I will be cautious," Futian replied as he nodded his head. "Thank you, Goddess, for the reminder. No worries. With Pavilion Master Yi's talents and abilities, you will certainly be able to stand out on Eastern Deity Island and draw the attention of those on the island. If Pavilion Master Yi is willing, we might have the opportunity to cultivate together in the future," Bai Mu hinted. Futian understood what she meant. Bai Mu said that if he was willing, he might be able to stay and cultivate on Eastern Deity Island. Every 10 years, Eastern Deity Island would invite prominent figures to enter the island to cultivate. This was not out of the ordinary. They would naturally also invite him. However, Futian did not answer. After all, he had no plans to do so. Yet, immediately rejecting their offer would be somewhat rude. After all, he was still on Eastern Deity Island. "If Goddess has no other instructions, I will head in first," Futian said. "All right," Bai Mu answered as she nodded her head. "Pavilion Master Yi, please feel free to do so." Futian saluted with his fists. His group then advanced into the mist. Outside, many people were still hesitating. They seemed to be considering whether they wanted to risk going in. Some of them had decided to go in, but many people had yet to take this step. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian's group entered into the illusory sky domain. It was as though they were in a different dimension. They could no longer find the entrance they came in from. It seemed like a matrix had cut them off from the outside world. Yi Futian's group entered into the illusory sky domain. It was as though they were in a different dimension. They could no longer find the entrance they came in from. It seemed like a matrix had cut them off from the outside world. This place was a piece of land. By expanding their wills, they could sense many cultivators present in this space. It's so packed. Yi Futian's will swept across the illusory sky domain. He discovered that this space was completely different from the outside world. This was a dense region filled with cultivators. It was as though all of them were gathered on one island. Everywhere their wills swept over, the place was filled with people. Before this, Bai Mu had said that 1/4 of the people who came to Eastern Deity Island had entered the domain. One could imagine how many cultivators that was. Tens of thousands of powerful cultivators had gathered together. Many among them were incredible figures. In the sky far in the distance, the sound of a terrifying collision could be heard. Yi Futian's group raised their heads and looked in the direction of the sound. They saw that a huge battle had broken out in the sky above the region of land. It was a group battle between many renhuangs. When they battled, it was as though the heavens and earth were being torn apart. The apocalyptic scene was extremely frightening. However, the people in the illusory sky domain seemed unfazed by the commotion. They seemed used to such battles. In this domain, battles were never happening in one place. Due to disputes over fateful encounters of the Great Path, there was friction between multiple parties in many places. Many battles had erupted even before Yi Futian had arrived in this place. Many people had fallen here. Many people did not go seeking fateful encounters from island to island, instead coming straight here. This was not their first time on Eastern Deity Island for many cultivators. By understanding the situation on top of having powerful abilities, they immediately rushed over to the illusory sky domain for the Great Path's fateful encounters within the domain. For example, Jun Chuyan had also done so. Yi Futian's will noticed him. There were many cultivators around Jiu Chuyan, forming an army of renhuangs. Yi Futian recalled that before this, Jun Chuyan was collecting Eastern Deity tokens. He must have collected them, so he could bring more cultivators into this domain. That way, when it came to seizing the fateful encounters of the Great Path, they would have the absolute advantage when it came to numbers. Around Yi Futian, the other cultivators also expanded their own wills. In a low voice, Emperor Helion said, "There are many fateful encounters of the Great Path in this place. There are sure to be many cultivators no matter where we go." Yi Futian naturally also noticed this. His will swept across the vast domain. He then moved and said, "Let's go." Their group headed in one direction. Not long after, they arrived at an ancient peak. This was a mountain that towered into the sky. The mountain was actually in the shape of a sword. Standing on the mountain, one could sense an extremely suppressive swordsmanship aura. It was as though this region was a sword domain, and was being enveloped by invisible sword will. It was a sword peak. This sword peak feels suppressive. It must have been left behind by a top figure, Beigong said. Even with his cultivation plane, it wasn't easy to truly sense how the sword will on the sword peak was present, and how powerful the sword will. Before the sword peak were 9 cultivation stone platforms. These stone platforms were connected to the sword peak. It seemed as though they too emanated the same sword will, and were one with the sword peak. Some cultivators were sitting on top of these stone platforms, comprehending the sword will. 9 stone platforms, Yi Futian stated as he swept a glance over them. Each stone platform had a person seated on them. There were 9 cultivators on them in total. They sat there, their minds elsewhere. The remaining cultivators were either standing guard beside them, or looking upon them. The figures of these 9 cultivators released auras of the Great Path. Yi Futian could clearly sense it. All 9 of them were different. The difference between them was even quite large. The strongest among them was an 8th tier upper-level renhuang. On the other hand, the weakest was a 3rd tier, but his temperament was extraordinary. He was guarded by cultivators following him. He must be from some extraordinary background to receive such treatment. Each stone cultivation platform contains a sword will, Yi Futian exclaimed. Emperor Helion and Beigong Ao looked at him. They were astonished that he could actually tell with just a glance. Rumor has it that this sword peak is a matrix that contains 9 different sword wills. Each stone platform is engraved with one sword will and is connected to the sword peak. By sitting on them, one can sense the existence of the sword will and comprehend it. It is beneficial for the swordsmanship of cultivators, Beigong Ao explained to Yi Futian. Yi Futian was known as Sword Emperor Lionian. His swordsmanship was exceptional. Beigong Ao had witnessed it firsthand. When Yi Futian attacked with his 3 sword wills, it was already a very frightening technique. Yi Futian stepped forward. However, the 9 stone platforms were already occupied by other people. There was no spot for him to cultivate. Even if he wanted to get onto one, he had to wait. However, there were too many cultivators waiting here. They were all waiting for the opportunity to get on the stone platforms and cultivate. Yi Futian's group couldn't wait until their turn. Yi Futian stood below the stone platforms. He gazed at the sword peak. His gaze suddenly became sinister and frightening, as though he could see through the great path. Immediately, a miraculous aura enveloped the endless space. It extended towards the sword peak. Very quickly, Yi Futian sensed a peculiar ley line. On top of the sword peak, there seemed to be 9 ley lines. These 9 ley lines were perfectly merged, forming a sword. Right now, in Yi Futian's eyes, this mountain was no longer a mountain, but instead a sword. 9 forms, Yi Futian mumbled to himself. His gaze turned towards the 9 stone platforms again. He said in a low voice, "This is a sword technique that consists of 9 forms that combine to become one sword. Their combined form is that sword peak. You have good eyes to be able to tell straight away," a swordsman exclaimed with his arms crossed in front of his chest. His arms were wrapped around his sword. He was clearly a swordsman. He smiled and looked at Yi Futian. However, his smile seemed somewhat bizarre. The 9 stone platforms contain 9 sword wills. These 9 sword wills form the sword will of the sword peak. Everyone knows that, someone else said. The person's gaze was still looking at the sword peak. He had calmly spoken, not looking at Yi Futian. Yi Futian replied as he nodded his head gently. So that was it. He asked, "What is the name of this sword technique?" "I am not sure," the person to the side replied. "In short, it is swordsmanship left behind by a mighty figure. It is just that for many years, it has been difficult to completely comprehend the 9 sword wills on the stone platform. As for the sword peak, no one has managed to fully understand it to this day. That means to say no one has completely mastered this sword technique." Yi Futian nodded his head slightly. He had also noticed that this sword technique was extraordinary. The sword contained within the sword peak was no ordinary sword. Yet the 9 sword wills contained within the stone platforms were not that difficult to comprehend. Yi Futian could clearly sense the sword wills. Are these 9 sword wills that difficult to comprehend? Yi Futian pondered out loud in a low voice. Of course, another female Renhuang to the side answered. The 9 sword wills are all different. They are 9 completely different swords. It is like learning 9 different sword techniques. If one could sit on the stone platform and sense the sword will, it might be somewhat easier. However, it is too difficult to even comprehend a single sword will from down here. She had just said this when her body suddenly released a brilliant light of swordsmanship that pierced the sky. When her sword will burst forth, the crowd could clearly sense a mighty current of swordsmanship flowing over her. She had comprehended one of the sword wills. Many people around her looked towards the woman. They revealed looks of appraisal and astonishment. To be able to feel and comprehend a sword will from below a stone platform, her comprehension must be exceptional, someone praised. The swordsmanship aura on the woman flowed over her. It was brilliant beyond comparison. After some time, only did her sword will gradually recede. She glanced over at Yi Futian and asked, "First time here?" Yi Futian nodded. He smiled and replied, "I arrived not long ago." She looked at the people around Yi Futian. She immediately understood. He should be from a major force from some continent, but not one of the top forces like those on Eastern Deity Island. However, Yi Futian's temperament was extraordinary. He was most likely from a prestigious family. From the looks of it, wanting to cultivate on the stone platforms will be impossible. You can focus on comprehending one sword will after getting on a stone platform, to see whether you have a chance of succeeding. If you sense that it will be difficult, you may as well give up and try your luck elsewhere. The female Renhuang added when she saw that Yi Futian's temperament was special. She then walked towards the back of another stone platform, preparing to comprehend another sword will. Many thanks, Yi Futian thanked the woman. The woman casually waved her hand. She did not mind, and had simply reminded him. It was not worthy of Yi Futian's thanks. Why don't you snatch a stone platform to cultivate on? Then, the chances of you comprehending a sword will might be higher. Another Renhuang said to the side with a smile. He seemed to have a mocking tone. There is no need, Yi Futian replied. The sword wills of these 9 stone platforms are clear as day, and are not difficult to comprehend. I do not need to sit on the stone platforms to do so. His words caused many Renhuangs to look over at him. The Renhuang to the side smiled and said, Is that so? Why don't you give it a try? I can't wait to see it. The female Renhuang, who had been speaking to Yi Futian, turned around and glanced at him. She warned, Don't be overconfident. There is more to the sword wills than meets the eye. As she said this, she continued training. Haha, he might have extraordinary talent and superb comprehension, and will be able to master the sword wills in an instant. A Renhuang mocked. However, this was just some teasing while they were not cultivating. There was no ill will to it. It was just that they had all been cultivating here, and hence knew the difficulty of comprehending the sword wills. Some of the sword wills of the sword peak were comparatively easier to comprehend. Many people had managed to do so, yet there were also a few that were very difficult. Yi Futian smiled and did not say any more. He stepped forward, came to a spot facing the sword peak, and sat down. The spot was coincidentally at the center of the 9 stone platforms. He looked towards a stone platform. Aura of the great path emanated from him, and enveloped the stone platform. In an instant, sword will circled and gathered around his body. Suddenly, currents of swordsmanship aura appeared around Yi Futian's figure. This attracted the gazes of many towards him. He was rather serious. Could it be that he actually believed that he could comprehend the sword wills from below the stone platforms in a short amount of time? It was difficult for even the cultivators sitting on the stone platforms to do so. Emperor Helion and the others also looked at Yi Futian. They were looking on in anticipation. For them, who knew about Yi Futian's talent, they also wanted to see how terrifying his comprehension was now. How long would he need to acquire the sword wills that many cultivators could not? The sword will on Yi Futian's figure grew more and more powerful. Beams of sword light flowed over his entire body. They seemed to emit a humming sound of swords. Many people looked towards him. He was causing quite a commotion. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Sword will flowed over Yi Futian's body, shining brilliantly. Simultaneously, in front of him, a flash of sword light suddenly shone from the stone platform. It was as though sword light was shining from the stone platform. Sword will circled the stone platform, seemingly about to burst forth from it. This scene caused the crowd to reveal strange expressions. Many people were joking just now. Yet, in the blink of an eye, the sword will seemed about to burst forth from the stone platform. Had the cultivator on the stone platform comprehended the sword will? Or had Yi Futian done so? Sword will flowed over Yi Futian's body, shining brilliantly. Simultaneously, in front of him, a flash of sword light suddenly shone from the stone platform. It was as though sword light was shining from the stone platform. Sword will circled the stone platform, seemingly about to burst forth from it. This scene caused the crowd to reveal strange expressions. Many people were joking just now. Yet, in the blink of an eye, the sword will seemed about to burst forth from the stone platform. Had the cultivator on the stone platform comprehended the sword will? Or had Yi Futian done so? That's all it takes to comprehend the sword will. Hadn't he just done it in an instant? With a long beard? The cultivator on the stone platform was also for a period of time. He was originally comprehended nothing so far, when suddenly Futian had just arrived from the stone platform, and he had already comprehended a sword more powerful. How did you do it? His body was drowned in it. Asked Futian. Yet it had not appeared because looked at him and said with a smile, "Swordsmanship aura flowed past his readily available. The entire stone platform he was sitting on was also shining." What was going on? The facial expression of the inquirer turned strange. The currents of swordsmanship aura on the stone platform flowed towards Futian. Very quickly. If he said it was very difficult, Futian seemed to establish a connection with the stone platform and resonate perhaps with this youth was lucky. This, or perhaps the gazes of those who had spoken just now were all frozen on him. Someone thought regardless of whether their cultivations were powerful or challenged Futian by saying, they were all staring wide-eyed at Futian. Since you said it is simple, some more senior middle-level renwangs were red sword wills too, right? This was too outrageous. Exactly. Then, it would help why would they cultivate comprehending other sword wills? Was this truly his first time? The crowd echoed their agreement. Many people felt as though they had received comforted by the suggestion. At that moment, frightening sword illusions burst forth now was all because of luck. Tens of thousands of sword illusions overlapped, becoming a sword ashamed to continue comprehending the sword wills here. A sword appeared above Futian's body. The cultivator was not a real sword, but a shadow of it. Right now was the most ashamed one. Resonated with the sword shadow, causing another sword shadow to appear on the sword peak. Futian had achieved it even though he was sitting at the bottom, which had been lingering above his head. The cultivator could only pretend that he did not know what had happened. Then all the illusions continued his cultivation. At this moment, those cultivators, Futian nodded in agreement, themselves that they were cross-legged at the same spot. Somewhat dejected. His gaze shifted towards another stone platform. Like what had happened just now, streaks of aura of the great path permeated and enveloped the stone platform. Futian sensed the sword will that was hidden in it. A flash of sword light seemed to glint in his eyes. It was as though he could capture the flow of the sword. Futian quietly sensed the sword will while streaks of it flowed all around his body. A flash of sword light shone on his body. All the cultivators who were cultivating nearby focused their attention on him. This fellow was too bizarre. He had actually successfully comprehended a sword will upon his arrival. It was difficult for others not to notice him. Everyone was anticipating Futian's failure. There was no special reason for it. They were simply jealous of his talent. Under the gazes of many cultivators, the sword will on Futian's body intensified. Soon, the stone platform which Futian targeted responded to. The sword will flowed towards the stone platform and lit it up. At the same time, the cultivator who was sitting on the stone platform opened his eyes and revealed a strange expression. Then, he turned around and looked in the direction of Futian. Next, a beam of light shot up to the sky, brightening up the area where Futian was. The flash of sword light was clear and brilliant. It was blinding and mysterious. A second sword will appeared behind Futian. It materialized into a real sword and floated behind his back. The sword hummed. This sword was different from the first sword. The first sword was akin to shadow, while this second sword was akin to light. All the cultivators stared at Futian, and the two sword wills behind him. The faces of many cultivators were red. They felt so ashamed of themselves. "Let's go." An elder turned around and walked away from the area. "Master, are we not comprehending these anymore? What's there to be comprehended? Such simple sword wills. One can tell from a glance that they are not powerful." The elder bawled at his disciple. The disciple lowered his head and mumbled internally. Since they were such simple sword wills, why didn't Master manage to comprehend them? Moreover, didn't Master tell him just now that these 9 swords were extraordinary, and they could increase their swordsmanship greatly if they were able to comprehend just one sword? This change of manner was too quick. The disciple turned around and glanced at Futian. Most likely, Master was too embarrassed to stay around. Futian could comprehend the sword wills in an instant. The other cultivators had been around for a while, yet they were nowhere near comprehending the sword wills. This fateful encounter did not belong to them, so they might as well leave right away. When the other cultivators saw what had happened, they were speechless as well. Was the difference in their level of comprehension that huge? People who could come here were all top figures in their respective continents. This mysterious white-haired Renhuang, who popped out of nowhere, had shattered their confidence. The difference between this Renhuang and them was too big. Thankfully, Only one such monstrous figure existed around here. The level of those cultivators sitting on the stone platforms was similar to that of the crowd. None of them were as powerful as Yi Futian. The female Ren Huang, who had moved on to the next stone platform before this, also stopped cultivating. She turned around and looked at Yi Futian. Just a while ago, she reminded Yi Futian not to be overconfident since these sword wills were not simple. She even advised him to stop wasting time and move on to other places if he could not comprehend it. So now, who should be the ones to move on to other places? She felt as though she was the one who was wasting her time here. However, Yi Futian did not take her words to heart. He didn't even look at her. He was immersed in his own training and had started comprehending the third sword will. Similar to before, not long after, yet another stone platform glowed. The stone platform was brilliant while the sword will lingered. A third sword appeared behind Yi Futian. This sword seemed to contain a terrifying grandeur. Even though it was a sword will, one could feel the weight of it. The crowd could feel the pressure emanated by the sword. There were 9 forms to this swordsmanship, and each form was unique. After one mastered and assimilated all 9 forms, then only could one acquire the complete sword technique. After Yi Futian had comprehended the third sword, he moved on to the fourth sword, the fifth sword, the sixth sword. At the foot of the sword peak, all the cultivators had ceased cultivating. They were all watching Yi Futian comprehending the sword wills. Standing behind Yi Futian, Emperor Helian, Beigong Ao, and the rest of Yi Futian's group was also staring at him. They were dumbfounded. As they stood there, they could sense that the crowd was scrutinizing them too. This was embarrassing. Could he be more subtle about it? With Yi Futian showing off, how could the rest cultivate? Beigong Shuang's eyes blinked as she stared at Yi Futian. This fellow was so powerful. Yet he was reluctant to guide her in her cultivation. On the stone platforms, the cultivators sitting on top of them had also stopped at this moment, not continuing to cultivate. They turned to look at Yi Futian instead, just sitting there watching him quietly. Was this a slap to their faces? How could they still sit on the stone platforms and cultivate? The figures cultivating on the stone platforms were not ordinary figures. They were either cultivators with high cultivation or members from powerful forces. Yet, once Yi Futian appeared, the rest of them were thoroughly disgraced. This B*SD*RD really wrecked our image, an 8th-tier cultivator grunted as he looked at Yi Futian. He had a sudden urge to beat Yi Futian up. However, he wanted to see whether this brat could comprehend all 9 sword wills. Indeed, a person sitting on another stone platform replied. Where could they put their old faces? There was a youth who had an ugly expression. However, his gaze was very sharp as he revealed a cold smile. He said his talent is exceptional. Why would he be bothered about how he made us look? The elder to the side glanced over at him. He smiled and did not say anything. This youth seemed dissatisfied. However, that was normal. The sword will of the stone platform he sat on was not generated because of him. This would certainly be very embarrassing. If it was wrong to have such astounding comprehension, then Yi Futian was definitely wrong. 7 swords had already been formed. Yi Futian was comprehending the 8th sword will. Yi Futian was taking a long time to comprehend this sword will. Many people were quietly watching him. Although they were displeased with Yi Futian's comprehension, the crowd was watching him very attentively. At last, currents of swordsmanship aura coalesced and appeared from the stone platform. This sword will was very slow and cumbersome. It did not seem to have the swiftness of swordsmanship. Instead, it was very slow. Behind Yi Futian, the 8th sword also appeared. Of the 9 swords of the sword peak, Yi Futian was only left with the last one now. Yi Futian's gaze shifted towards the final stone platform. On it, there was a black-robed youth staring at him. The youth asked, "Your aura of the Great Path is extraordinary. What powers of the Great Path have you cultivated?" "Swordsmanship, the 5 elements, etc. I have dabbled in all of them," Yi Futian replied. "Based on your description, you have comprehended many great paths," the black-robed youth concluded. The black-robed youth was a middle-level Ren Huang. His temperament was sharp, and he emanated a pressuring vibe. He continued to inquire. The aura of the great path that you unleashed contains a unique will. Can you unleash it again, and let me sense it? The energy unleashed by Yi Futian was inclusive, and it seemed to be able to draw out the currents of swordsmanship aura in the stone platforms. According to the black-robed youth's speculation, Yi Futian's quick comprehension was most likely related to his cultivation. It wasn't entirely, because he was good at comprehending. Yi Futian glanced at the other party. He had replied the other party's question, yet this black-robed youth pried into his cultivation method. His behavior was rude. The few people who were behind Yi Futian frowned too. Before this, Yi Futian's training here had been rather smooth. Even though the other cultivators were envious of him, they didn't really do anything to him. However, the attitude of this black-robed youth made them feel uneasy. I refuse, Yi Futian rejected with a smile. After that, his aura of the great path permeated as he continued to comprehend the last sword will. When the black-robed youth heard Yi Futian's answer, his extremely sharp gaze shot out a beam of cold light of swordsmanship. Yi Futian refused to show him his aura. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian did not bother with the other party anymore. His aura of the Great Way merged into that stone platform above, and perceived the sword will in it. Yi Futian did not bother with the other party anymore. His aura of the Great Way merged into that stone platform above, and perceived the sword will in it. Leaping blades of light appeared in his perception, as though they were omnipresent. Buzz! Instantly, countless blades of lights also surrounded Yi Futian's body, leaping and dancing. Many people looked toward Yi Futian, and the blades of light behind him. Sword chimes sounded as the swords flew around. Brilliant sword glints also shone atop the stone platform, and resonated with Yi Futian. The ninth sword was about to be created. Everyone was in awe. The various mighty cultivators' expressions changed from ones of curiosity, envy and jealousy to those of seriousness as they watched Yi Futian. Did he really find it effortless to wield 9 swords? What was the gap between them and Yi Futian? And why did he have such extraordinary powers of comprehension? Who was this white-haired sword emperor? At that moment, a powerful swordsmanship airflow flowed from top to bottom, atop the stone platform, and engulfed it instantly. The swordsmanship airflow suppressed the sword will within the stone platform, and resonated with Yi Futian. In fact, it used a sword realm to seal the sword will within the stone platform. Many people were stunned. Following the stone platform upward, they saw the youth in black robes standing straight as a sword there. Wisps of sword will flowed from his body toward the stone platform. It was he who was disrupting the resonance between the sword will within the stone platform and Yi Futian, causing an interruption in Yi Futian's comprehension of the ninth sword. Hence, the ninth sword did not appear. You can't do it. The man in black stood there quietly, looking at Yi Futian indifferently. He was the cultivator on the stone platform. He ignored him and directly sensed the sword will on the stone platform, and refused to answer his question. This scene made the people each have their own ideas. Sure enough, this man in black was unhappy with Yi Futian, and hindered him from continuing his cultivation. Among the 9 people, although the other 8 people were a little upset, they did not stop Yi Futian and clash with him. After all, everyone was cultivating, and did not interfere with one another. Yi Futian's power of comprehension was stronger, and he still resonated with the stone platform despite not sitting on it. They could only tolerate their displeasure and embarrassment. After all, they were not the only ones who were embarrassed. Besides Yi Futian, who here was not embarrassed. But when Yi Futian was comprehending the last sword, someone hindered him from continuing his cultivation, and even directly sealed the sword will in the stone platform with his own sword will, not allowing Yi Futian to comprehend it. Yi Futian's eyes looked up at the stone platform. The pair of brilliant star-like eyes gazed at his opponent, and were also sharp as swords. Their gazes clashed in the air, and many people even faintly sensed a powerful and extremely oppressive swordsmanship airflow flowing and spreading toward the surrounding space. They both remained silent, just staring at each other. It was as though everything could be conveyed through their actions. Yi Futian's expression did not change as his sword-like eyes shot out rays of sword glint. With a shift of his divine consciousness, boundless amounts of sword chi flowed, and the surrounding space became a great path sword domain. Countless wisps of swordsmanship airflow flowed toward the stone platform, trying to remove the sealing power. Meanwhile, the blades of light surrounding his body were still incandescent, and he did not stop cultivating. The man in black swept a faint glance at Yi Futian. A terrifying sword slash sounded from the sky, then a dark lightning sword glint descended from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Numerous swords descended directly from the firmament, stabbed the area around the stone platform, completely sealed that space, made it an absolute swordsmanship realm, and stripped away all of Yi Futian's power of swordsmanship. The two of them seemed to have gotten fired up, and were already clashing. Many people had strange expressions. The man in black robes was a middle-level Renhuang, but had an astonishing aura and an extremely powerful sword will. He was not like ordinary middle-level Renhuangs. A row of mighty practitioners stood on the left and right of the stone platform. Obviously, they were practitioners who followed the man in black robes here. Among them, there were two people at the 8th order of the divine wheel. Hence, the man in black definitely had an extraordinary identity. He was probably someone from a top faction of some continent. If not, he would not have had such a lineup. No wonder he was that arrogant. When Yi Futian refused to answer his question, he attacked directly and stopped Yi Futian from comprehending the 9th sword any further. However, Yi Futian also had a group of mighty cultivators behind him. They stood there and looked straight ahead. Their gazes were hostile and cold as they stared at the man in black. They all wanted to comprehend the sword peak. And everything here was the great path opportunity of the Eastern Deity Island. It did not belong to anyone. Since they gained control of the stone platform, they also gained control of it. Others knew that they were incapable of fighting for it, and naturally did not do so. Yi Futian also did not fight for it. Yi Futian was comprehending and cultivating under the stone platform. If that also angered them, that would already be somewhat unreasonable. Could it be that only those who were sitting on the stone platform were allowed to comprehend and cultivate? Although the remaining 8 mighty figures still joked around, they did not have any malice toward Yi Futian. Only the man in black acted domineeringly. At this moment, a horrifying sword realm appeared around Yi Futian. A vast sword might went rampant in the void, causing the surrounding people's hearts to shudder. What a strong swordsmanship aura! Although Yi Futian also showed his aura before, that was in cultivation. But at this moment, the true offensive power of the swordsmanship erupted. All the lower Renhuangs felt that they could not be mentioned in the same breath as him. Even the many middle-level Renhuangs felt a powerful oppressive force. He has forged a perfect grade divine wheel, an elderly high-order Renhuang said while gazing at Yi Futian. Indeed, how could a person who could comprehend 9 swords consecutively not be extremely talented? Considering how he had a perfect grade divine wheel of the Great Path, he must be a demon from some continent. Above Yi Futian, 3 extraordinary sword wills formed. The sword wills released horrifying sword chimes that pierced eardrums, and everyone could feel an extremely strong sharp airflow. However, the man in black did not care at all, and huge black swords coalesced. Each huge sword contained a superb destructive power. With the stone platform as the center, they also created a terrifying sword realm. That probably happened because a lower Renhuang could not maintain his perfect grade divine wheel of the Great Path after he broke through. An elder secretly thought after sensing this powerful aura, if it were always an ordinary divine wheel of the Great Path, the man in black's swordsmanship would have been suppressed by Yi Futian's sword might. But he did not, which meant that he had a perfect grade divine wheel of the Great Path previously. Although he did not maintain it after breaking through, he was still far better than ordinary middle-level Renhuang's. His aura was no weaker than Yi Futian's sword will, and even a little bit stronger. After all, he once had a divine wheel of the Great Path at the same level as that of Yi Futian, and he was at a higher cultivation level. Buzz! The 3 sword wills behind Yi Futian were released and descended in an instant, directly blasting on top of that forbidden power. With a terrifying sound, cracks appeared in the ceiling sword veil. The stone platform trembled continuously, and with a poof, the ceiling power shattered, and Yi Futian resonated with the sword intent within the stone platform again. Blades of light emerged from the stone platform, mirroring the blades of light on his body. Boom! The moment Yi Futian broke open the seal, a horrifying rumble sounded. "Be careful," Emperor Helion reminded him. The countless black swords floating in the sky descended toward Yi Futian with a horrifying might. The seal the man in black set up was broken, and Yi Futian forcefully comprehended the 9th sword, causing him to start unleashing his killing blow. The giant black swords were extremely fast, descending in an instant. The swords seemed to have terrifying patterns on them, and each sword contained a terrifying dark light of destruction, wanting to directly kill Yi Futian. Countless blades of light flew around Yi Futian, creating a sword veil and obstructing the space, preventing his opponent's swords from going through. But horrifying rumbles sounded, and the sword veil trembled violently. Cracks appeared under the attacks of the giant black swords, and it shattered and disintegrated. The giant black swords continued to move toward Yi Futian. A destructive sword river appeared, and under the swords, everything was destroyed. In this instant, another gorgeous blade of light appeared behind Yi Futian. At this moment, the 9th sword actually coalesced and came into being, exuding an incomparably terrifying swordsmanship glow. The 9 sword wills have all been comprehended. The people looked at Yi Futian and were extremely unsettled. Moreover, he did it while being obstructed by the man in black. By now, many people had already guessed the origins of the man in black. He was from the Black Iron Sword clan, the top swordsmanship faction of the Magic Stone continent. No wonder he was so domineering. The Black Iron Sword clan was very strong. On the Magic Stone continent, it was the top faction. Yi Futian's gaze was icy as he swept his gaze toward his opponent. Instantly, 3 sword wills shot up toward the man in black. But a giant black divine sword appeared behind him. It was his divine wheel of the Great Path. Giant black swords circled around him, and when the 3 sword wills crashed onto it, they did not break the defense, only emitting a sharp and piercing sound. The man in black stood in the center of the sword like he was standing on a throne, with a haughty coldness in his gaze. A terrifying golden divine statue appeared around Yi Futian's body, rumbling loudly. The giant black sword blasted on top of the divine statue, causing it to shake violently, but it was not broken. The black-clothed young man raised his hand and stretched out toward the void in front of him, and in an instant, a huge black iron sword appeared above Yi Futian's head. It was all black, flashing with dark divine light. Countless swordsmanship air currents flowed above the sword. Each ray of swordsmanship air current turned into a sword falling down, blasting around Yi Futian's body, sealing the space where Yi Futian was. The giant sword was still gathering even more power. When the sword descended, it was as though doomsday had arrived. So strong. The hearts of the people shook as they looked at the black-clothed young man. Was he really going to kill? Would the people behind Yi Futian attack? If they intervened, the other mighty figures of the Black Iron Sword clan might attack as well. If that happened, the giant sword would still fall, and they would not be able to stop him from killing Yi Futian. Many people had strange expressions. Although Yi Futian made all the practitioners here embarrassed, they did not have any intention to kill him. After all, they had no grudges against him, and did not need to kill him. The black-clothed youth man ignored the thoughts of the people. He pointed his finger down, and at once, the giant sword fell toward Yi Futian. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.